Good morning, everyone. This is Joe Lecesse. I'm the chair of the sports group at Proskauer Rose in New York. And I have the pleasure of interviewing this morning Mark Murphy, who is the president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers franchise in the National Football League. Mark has an extraordinarily interesting background. He was a Super Bowl champion NFL player with the Washington Redskins team in the late 70s and early 80s. He then went on to get an MBA, a JD, to become a union leader for the NFL Players Association. Later an athletic director at Northwestern and Colgate Universities, and ultimately in his current role as president and CEO of the Packers, one of the most highly sought after and valued jobs in sports. So Mark, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Joe. It's great to be here. And it's the Washington football team now, Joe.
Yes, absolutely. I was trying to mention what it was when you were there, but absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So Mark, tell us what one of the things that comes out from your resume is your drive, and maybe you could speak a little bit as to what drove you as an elite athlete to also get so many advanced degrees and then to sort of enter the executive ranks of sports.
Well, I would question whether I was an elite athlete. I didn't have a scholarship offer coming out of high school. Went to Colgate, which at the time was non-scholarship football program, and then I wasn't drafted in the NFL. And so I've always kind of had a chip on my shoulder, and I think that's part of what has driven me is that that I feel like I really had to work harder for things and to earn the respect. Even though I ended up playing 8 years in the NFL, every year I felt like I had to prove myself and make the team. So, I guess in terms of, back then, I didn't make much money. My rookie year, I made $21,000. I also had a job offer from General Electric. Would have paid me about $17,000. So it's a little different now, but I never really thought football would last very long. So early on, started working on my master's in my second year, wanted to try to take advantage of the time that I had in the off season, which it was very different then. We had a lot more time in the off season. A lot of my teammates worked. And so it's been just very different, but I've been very blessed too, I would say, along the way. I've had some great mentors and people that have really been instrumental in helping me advance in my career.
Well, that $4,000 spread between GE and Washington was probably the most valuable $4,000 in sports history. So obviously with all of those iterations, player, executive, union leader, how did that influence your leadership style in your current position?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I don't know if I was necessarily a natural leader. I was kind of shy when I was growing up, but I've been very fortunate throughout my career. I've been around some great coaches, particularly some great leaders that I've learned from. Probably the first one is somebody that not many people have heard of. His name's Fred Dunlap, and Fred played football at Colgate, went on to become a very successful college coach. He was the head coach at Lehigh, had success there. And then going into my senior year at Colgate, he was recruited to become the head coach and athletic director at Colgate. And so I was a senior at the time. I'd been elected captain, and that was really, really beneficial to me. To see a new coach come in and see the different things that he did in terms of establishing his program, and really learned a lot from Fred in that 1 year. But then he's really been a mentor for me throughout the years. I succeeded him as athletic director, and he's been a big help to me. Early on in my tenure at Colgate, our football team was 0-11, and we had a football coach that the university wouldn't let me fire. And so Fred and I talked, and we came up with a plan. So Fred came out of retirement, and he worked for free. He was our offensive coordinator, and that freed up enough money that they allowed me to fire the coach, and I promoted an assistant that I had a lot of confidence in, and that Fred did as well. And 2 years later, the Colgate won the Patriot League and was in the NCAA playoffs. So I owe an awful lot to Fred. And then in my the other person who's shaped me a little bit was Joe Gibbs. Obviously, people are familiar with him, and I mean, you look at the success that Joe's had in football, and then now in NASCAR. It's a tribute to him and his leadership ability. And I was very fortunate. I was about halfway through my career with the Redskins. I was a starter. I was captain of the team, and to be able to be there when Joe came in. I think we got off to a little bit of a rocky start. We lost, I think, 4 or 5 of our first games, but ended up finishing the season strong in 1981. We ended up 8-8, and then next year won the Super Bowl. And so just watching Joe and seeing the way he led and the way he treated people has really shaped the way I have developed as a leader.
Is there a distinguishing characteristic about Coach Gibbs that differentiated him from other coaches that you were exposed to?
I would say his empathy. He just really cared about people, and he was every day he would walk through the locker room. He'd stop at every player's locker, talk to them, ask them what kind of things you think will work this week. What should we be working on in practice? You've probably heard the term, Joe, the MWA, the management by wandering around, and that's one of the things that I try to do myself. It's a little hard in the pandemic. But Joe did that, and it's very easy, I think, for the leaders or bosses to say my office is always open. Well, the reality is a lot of people are not comfortable walking into the boss's office and talking with them. But when the leader of the organization is walking through the office building, through the locker room, stopping in and talking with people. I find that you learn so much about what's going on in the organization, and I think it really shows people in the organization that you care, and that's something that I took directly from Coach Gibbs.
And working in Green Bay, obviously the spirit of Vince Lombardi must still permeate the organization. One of the great leaders in all of sports, somebody who coached both in Green Bay and in Washington. The championship trophy is named after Coach Lombardi. What's your favorite anecdote about Coach Lombardi that you've heard from some of the great old Packers?
I tell you, one of the real blessings in my job is a chance to be able to spend time with players like Jerry Kramer and Dave Robinson, and just it's funny. Vince Lombardi was not that old when he died. I think and he was with the Packers, and then he went to the Redskins. I think he was like 57 when he died, but they all called him the old man. And so I was trying to, obviously times were different then, but, one of the things that really set him apart, and Dave Robinson and Willie Davis and actually Jerry Kramer as well, he was ahead of his time in terms of race relations. And I think a lot of it was because he had faced discrimination because he was Italian. He was a great offensive coordinator, but didn't get a lot of opportunities to become a head coach until the Packers opportunity came. So he was ahead of his time in terms of signing and supporting black players. And, they tell stories that, he went to local businesses and said, hey, if you're not going to let my black players in, you're off limits to the whole team. And so he was really strong in terms of supporting the players' rights. And I think obviously that meant a lot to the players to see. And you look at the success he had, I don't think it'll ever be repeated again.
That's probably, Mark, a wonderful entry to one of the most important stories of the year, socially as well as athletically, which is the social justice movement in sports. How has that taken hold in your locker room, and what has your role in that been as the leader of the organization?
Yeah, it's obviously a very strong movement, as it should be. We saw it a couple of years ago with the national anthem issues, particularly in 2017. but I think it's come to another level now, in my mind. And it's our locker room, and I often meet with our players. And I think for us, particularly, the Jacob Blake shooting, happening in Wisconsin, in our backyard, really impacted our players. And what struck me is, well, number one, how passionate they were about it, but it was also how united they were. And they wanted to bring attention to it. And obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks, were kind of the leaders in the movement in terms of bringing attention to it. And so our players are very united. And, we want to bring attention to the issues and the problems, but I think we also want to start to move beyond that and to see progress and change. And that's something that we're going to do everything we can to help our players. And it can be a divisive issue, but it's the right thing, and we're gonna support our players, and we're doing it not only to support our players, but this is the right thing for our society. These aren't really, I don't view these as political issues, Joe. I think it's more issues of basic human rights. And and it's funny, the league, well, it's not funny, but the league does a lot of polling, and they've seen, I think even over the last couple of years, we've seen a pretty big change in terms of people supporting our right to peacefully protest and get involved in social justice issues. We think it's upwards now of 60% of our fans are supportive of those efforts.
And Mark, we're only 30 or so days away from our election here in the United States, and Wisconsin is often touted as one of the 2 or 3 swing states that will determine the election.
Battleground. Yeah.
and you've got a really interesting state. You've got highly progressive areas around the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Milwaukee, and then you've got extremely conservative areas. All of them are dedicated to Green Bay Packers. Have you seen differences in the way your fans have reacted to the activism by your players and the players on the Bucks and other organizations?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, we've heard from a number of fans that are upset with, either not coming out for the national anthem or some of the statements that we've made. And I think you have to be careful, Joe. I think people are much more likely in those situations to contact you with negative when they're upset about something, rather than writing and saying, we support, we think you're doing the right thing, and we support your, although we have gotten some letters to that in that regard. But I think it tends to be, and I don't want to stereotype, but it tends to be some of our older fans, and probably more male fans than female. But again, it's one of those issues where we know we're going to probably lose some fans over it, but it's the right thing to do. And it's kind of trite, but you want to be on the right side of history on this one, and I believe we are. I think time.
Mark, I imagine the locker room, today is very different than it was in the 1980s. What role do you think that's played in the ability of the players to mobilize so quickly and to rally around a single point?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I played in the late 70s and early 80s. It was very different. And the players, you didn't have social media. Players didn't really have the platforms that they have now, or the rights, quite honestly. And I think players now are more willing to speak out. And I think we're supportive of that. I think, I don't know. I watched the documentary "Shut Up and Dribble." I don't know if you've seen that, but I guess the analogy for us was, just shut up and play football. But there's a long history, and we mentioned Vince Lombardi, and there's a long history of athletes speaking out on important societal issues. Whether it's Jackie Robinson or Jesse Owens, I think our players have a platform, and I would say they have an obligation to utilize that to speak and to help others that can't. And it's for our players. I mean, and obviously I'm white, I cannot relate to what they have seen, but just talking to our players, the situations where, that they've faced just because they're black, it's not right.
And one of the things that I know took me a little bit by surprise, and we have a very international audience for this conference, was how quickly many of the players on the European soccer clubs were also showing support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Were your players aware of that? Were they energized by that?
Yeah, our players are actually, and not all of them, but a number of them are huge fans of international soccer and are aware of it. Yeah, no, I think athletes, professional athletes particularly, there's a bond with each other, and they see some of the issues that we're dealing with. I think it's great to see the support, and same thing here in the United States. You saw the MLS support, and Major League Baseball, where it's a much smaller percentage of the players are African American, but they've stood up and supported. And the NBA and the NFL are pretty high. Majority of the players are African American, so you would expect it there. But in some of the other sports, it's been great to see their support as well.
And obviously, when we're talking about issues like this, we often talk about community. And one of the things many members of our audience overseas may not really recognize is that of the more than 150, premier U.S. professional sports teams, the Green Bay Packers is the only one that's community owned. Maybe you could address a little bit what influence that has on how you operate day to day and how that's manifested itself both in the social justice.
Yeah, well, you're right. Obviously, we're very unique. We're a unicorn, as they would say. There's nobody quite like us, and it's not. And the Packers, the history. It's it's an amazing story that the Packers have even survived. The Green Bay is by far the smallest market in the NFL, and early on, over our history, we've had 5 different stock sales, and the first 3 were really to make sure the team stayed in Green Bay. And so we're community owned. Right now we have 370,000 shareholders. But then the league, and I think it was back in the 50s, the league changed the rules. And so you had to have a single controlling owner, but they grandfathered in the Packers. So there'll never be another team like the Packers. And, it's analogous, I'd say, Joe, more to the way a university here in the United States operates with a board of directors or a board of trustees. We've got a board of directors of 45. Then there's an executive committee of 7, and I'm one of the 7. And so that's really where the business decisions are made. And but I think by and large, the disadvantage would be we don't have a deep-pocketed, wealthy owner that, if we're in challenging times, we can rely on the owner for additional support or funding. But what we've done to kind of offset that is we've created what we call the Packers Preservation Fund or a corporate reserve fund. That's up to about $450 million now, and so kind of set that aside for a rainy day. Other than that, we have a committee structure within our board. Obviously internally, we've got myself and our vice presidents and directors. We have a structure and we meet on a regular basis. And I think we're fluid enough where we're able to make quick decisions when needed. I know, so we can't, all 370,000 shareholders can't go to the NFL owners meeting to represent the Packers. So I represent the Packers at the owners meetings, and sometimes we do get looks from some of the other owners. Not quite sure exactly how it works. Back in 2011, we had a stock sale, and we ended up raising quite a bit of money for our south end zone project. We added about 10,000 seats, and kind of gave an explanation and talked a little bit about this project. And Jerry Jones raised his hand. He said, you tell me how that works. I might be interested in that. So but we've only had 5 stock sales. and the league controls them. And it has to be for projects, capital projects around the stadium. We can't, for instance, sell stock to pay our coaches or pay our players more money. It's got to be something that we're putting into the stadium.
And you mentioned earlier that you are by far the smallest market in the NFL, probably the smallest market in any of the major U.S. professional sports leagues. I think our friends at Nielsen would say that you're the 72nd DMA, the measure that we use for market size in the U.S., yet along with the Cowboys and one or two others, you're among the most iconic brands. But I don't know that any professional sports team in any community has gotten more out of a small market than the Packers. And I thought that was exemplified by your recent Titletown development. Maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about how that came to be and what that may be doing to stabilize your revenue streams.
Yeah, no, it's something that, we've been working on, over the last decade. And, just one of the nice things about the NFL is, obviously we compete like heck against each other on the field, but off the field, we can learn from others and what things are working from a business standpoint. And so we started looking at, we knew land around Lambeau Field was valuable. So over the years, we've started purchasing land, not with a specific idea or concept, but knowing that it would be valuable. And one of the things that we looked at, the Patriots, they're in kind of suburban Massachusetts in Foxborough, and they have went forward with a development called Patriot Place. So we visited there. We liked parts of it and thought it made a lot of sense. And so we've taken some bits and pieces of that. Patriot Place is kind of like, I would say it's like a really nice mall, number of different stores there. And so we have took parts of that, but Titletown, and it's 45 acres adjacent to Lambeau Field. And the concept really is to make Lambeau Field, it's something that right now our fans, or before Titletown, fans that come in for a day or two for the game. With Titletown now, we think people are going to spend 4 or 5 days in Green Bay, and really to make Green Bay and Lambeau Field more of a destination. So, Titletown, as I said, is 45 acres. The first areas to open. Well, the other thing I would say it's kind of unique is right in the middle of it is a full football field. Not many private developers would do that, but we wanted that to kind of be the centerpiece. We've also got a sledding and tubing hill. We did a lot of focus groups, and one of the things that kept coming back was, the winters are cold and long in Wisconsin. So if there's something you can do to get us outside and active in the winters, and so that was the concept behind the tubing hill, and then also a skating trail and pond. So those are actually going to be opening up fairly soon. We've got the first anchors to open up. Kohler, I think most people probably familiar with Kohler, with the golf courses, but they opened up a hotel. Kohler is about 45 minutes south of Green Bay in Sheboygan. And so we have a Lodge Kohler Hotel. We've got a Hinterland restaurant and brewery that had kind of outgrown its space downtown. And then we have a Bell and Health orthopedic center. So those were the first 3 anchors to open up. We have an office complex called Titletown Tech. That's our partnership with Microsoft, where we're starting to invest in startup companies. And what we're just opening up now, the other thing, we have a huge playground, I'd say right next to the football field. And what we're building now, and we've been very fortunate through the pandemic to be able to continue to work, we're going to have 50 to 70 townhouses. We'll have an apartment complex, and then we'll have an office tower. And so it's very unique for Green Bay, but it's something that we think is going to be really change the community, make a big difference. And as you mentioned, I think for the long term for the Packers, it'll give us some diversity in terms of our investments and should really help us. I mentioned the office tower. It's going to be 6 stories high, and only in Green Bay is 6 stories high enough to qualify as a tower.
There you go. Well, you'll have to build a second one soon. But Mark, one of the things that strikes me about that is obviously NFL is a live entertainment business. Most of the facilities you're talking about, which sound quite attractive in Titletown, are live entertainment facilities. And here we are in the middle of the ultimate rainy day, right? The global pandemic. What's it been like for you to try and run a team in a locker room that's not in a bubble? NFL teams are traveling back and forth to play their games. We had an outbreak the other day with the Titans. That must be kind of a unique stress point, a unique management experience for you.
Oh my gosh. And Joe, it's you go through all different case studies in business school, and they never came up with this one, but it has been challenging. I think the league has really done an excellent job. We have had the fortune, I think, unlike the NBA and hockey, that was kind of the middle of their season and then have shut it down. So we've been able to learn from some of the other sports, but for instance, even conducting the draft virtually, that was successful. Training camp went well. Obviously, we decided not to have any preseason games, and we've done fairly well. I think you're right. The situation in Tennessee is kind of a wake-up call for all of us. I think we knew that these kind of things would pop up. And so we've really, hopefully we'll be able to learn from this and get through it. But it shows you how fragile things are, Joe. Things can really change very quickly and spread very fastly. So far, and actually, well, the other thing I would say, our priority all along has been making sure we get the games played on television. And I think when you kind of take a broader look, roughly 2/3 of our revenue comes from broadcast television. So that really has been the focus for us. We've got our second home game coming up. We haven't had fans for our first two games. And Wisconsin has kind of been a hotspot recently, so we're very reluctant to start bringing fans in. That adds another issue and another challenge, I think, for all teams. And so hopefully we'll be able to get fans in, but we want to ease into it and not try to take too much on at once, particularly with some of the other issues. And Joe, you would not believe the number of protocols that we get on a daily basis from the league office. It's just, and as it should be, and things are changing quickly. And, so I guess that's a long way of saying trying to play professional sports and professional football, particularly in a pandemic, is not easily done.
Well, I don't imagine your spouse giving you a nasal swab for Christmas this year, so I think you've had quite enough of that. Mark, one of the other areas that's changing very quickly is the college sports landscape. The initiatives here in the U.S. To allow otherwise amateur athletes to be compensated for the use of their name, image, and likeness. There have been very few executives that have the experience as leaders on both the college side and the pro side like you do. How do you see that playing out generally in college sports, and particularly with the relationship of the NFL and college football?
Yeah, well, first of all, the NFL and college football have had a very good relationship for years. It's probably, quite honestly, I think it's going to be tested a little bit this year. With the college football season playing out the way it is, and I know I think a lot of the top players have opted out of playing, and so we'll have to make decisions on the draft held as normal. What are we going to do about the combine? Having been an athletic director for 16 years, I've always been against paying athletes. I know it's inevitable that certainly they're going to be compensated more. One of the problems I've seen, Joe, is we need to do more to make sure the student athletes graduate. And its graduation rate at some of the schools is embarrassing. And, you look at, like when I was at Northwestern, it's probably up to $100,000 a year now, the value of a full year scholarship at Northwestern. And probably the best thing you can do is ensure that they get their degree, and if they haven't got it, that they can come back and get it at any time. But Yeah, and I worry about the other sports. I mean, you look at it now, there's tremendous pressure for football to come back, even though obviously there's, health risk involved with that. I look at us and the amount of money that we're spending, particularly on testing, and to do everything we can to keep our players safe. And at the college level, they've got less resources and more players. It's going to be a very, very big challenge to get through the season. But what I really, and I dropped sports myself, when I was at Colgate. So I know that there are financial pressures, but I hated to see what I've seen recently is, number of the schools are dropping some of their non-revenue sports. And that's a shame, because those are really more of your pure athletes that, they're playing not because they want to become professionals in the sport, but, for the love of the sport and to get a great education.
Well, one of the other things that got dropped recently was the name of the team for which you formerly played, the Washington football team. I'm just curious how you and those of your peers that played for the team in the 80s and 90s, how you all reacted to that.
Yeah, I talked to a few. I know some of my teammates are, I guess, kind of nostalgic, and it's the end of an era. My own view was, I think it was time, and that it needed to be changed. And I'm hopeful that with this name change, that it'll allow the team to get back in Washington, D.C. And the location there and the stadium now, it's not what they had when they had RFK right in the middle of D.C. It brought everybody in the community together. I think it'd be great if they can get a new stadium and have it in DC. That RFK location is perfect. It's right off, the metro's right there. And I'd love to be able to see if that took place. Joe, this really lets me know I'm getting old. Jason Wright, the new president of the Washington football team, was a student athlete when I was the AD at Northwestern. So it's been kind of fun to reconnect with him. And he's going to do great things. He's just a pretty special person, really sharp, played in the NFL for 7 years, has a great background, and looking forward to seeing what he can do with the Washington football team.
Yeah, no, he certainly looks like he has a bright future. So, Mark, thank you for participating today. I guess the last question I'd have, probably 99% of the audience thinks you have just about the best job in sports. So the one thing I noticed is you don't have a PhD. Any chance you're going to go get a PhD?
No, my education, my formal education is over. Although I will say, and you know this, your education never ends. I think you're always learning. And I mean, this is a good example. I mean, I didn't know anything about some of these things that that now with the pandemic we're learning an awful lot about.
Terrific. Well, look, thank you, and continue good success this season. And we look forward to maybe seeing you host the Lombardi Trophy.
That sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
Take care now, Mark.
Yeah.